Let's talk about something huge that changed the Arab world. They call it the Arab Spring. Protests that began 10 years ago in Tunisia spread across the region. They brought down autocrats.
Almost 30 years of Mubarak's regime ended.
And started wars.
Years of war have devastated Syria.
Libya has been in turmoil for nearly a decade.
Tunisia, though, managed to avoid all that.
Tunisia is often referred to as a success story out of all of the Arab Spring countries.
But can we really call Tunisia a success? What did Tunisia do that other countries didn't? And is the Arab Spring over? It probably makes sense that on the 10th anniversary of the Arab Spring, we look at how an act of extreme desperation started it all. It happened in Tunisia in December 2010. Mohamed Bouazizi sold fruit in the street. He was 26 years old, supporting his whole family and making hardly any money. One day, the police tried to confiscate his cart. They said he didn't have a permit, but Bouazizi said the officers wanted a bribe. A policewoman even slapped him. And when he tried to complain to local officials, he was ignored. So outside a government building, he set himself on fire. Mohamed died a few weeks later.
Within weeks, there were protests across Tunisia. Mohamed's plight resonated with so many people because they were also suffering from some of the same frustrations.
The most powerful man in the country brought down by one of the most powerless.
People across the Middle East and North Africa felt inspired to demand change in their countries too.
It does not seem that they are going to be easily satisfied unless the president himself stands down.
They were calling on these governments to be held accountable for the social injustices that they were subjected to for decades. It was a revolutionary moment on a scale that we hadn't really seen since the struggles for independence from colonial rule.
So here's a quick recap of what happened where. In Tunisia, the president was in power for 23 years, but he was kicked out after just a month of protests. Over in Egypt, it took just 18 days to get rid of Hosni Mubarak after 30 years. Egypt then got its first democratically elected president, Mohamed Morsi, but his government was overthrown by the military, and the military is still pretty much in charge. In Libya, Muammar Gaddafi was captured and killed after 42 years in power. That created a power vacuum and led to a civil war that's still going on. Yemen's president, Ali Abdullah Saleh, was pushed out after 33 years. But since then, the country's been more divided than ever, and fighting between the rebel Houthis and a Saudi-led military coalition has created one of the world's worst humanitarian disasters. And then there's Syria. It's sort of the exception because Bashar al-Assad hasn't gone away. What started as peaceful protests there became one of the worst conflicts of our time, with Assad's government, groups including ISIL, and foreign powers all fighting for control. Other countries had uprisings too, like Bahrain. But Saudi Arabia sent troops across the border to save the monarchy. So in most countries, the Arab Spring didn't lead to what many protesters wanted. Some would even say things went backwards.
We've seen renewed authoritarianism and a level of oppression that is, even worse than it was from before the Arab Spring in some of those cases.
But let's look at one country that appears to have got some things right. As a young democracy, Tunisia has a lot going for it. It got a new constitution. It's held several elections. The media are considered free, and people can protest too.
Tunisia was able to undergo a relatively peaceful political transition.
The Nobel Peace Prize for 2015 is to be awarded to the Tunisian National Dialogue Quartet.
Tunisia has also done something remarkable. I'm talking about the Truth and Dignity Commission. It was set up to investigate things like rights abuses and corruption under the former regime. There were more than 62,000 complaints from victims. Some of the hearings were even televised.
It seeks accountability in some cases, it seeks reparations, it seeks national reconciliation. So it's an inherently controversial and political process because it really digs deep into the roots of the ugliness of authoritarian rule and oppression.
Little wonder then that there's been resistance. Politicians from the old regime are back in power, and they're accused of trying to stop the commission's work. They even passed a law that grants amnesty to officials accused of corruption during Ben Ali's time. There have also been security problems. Fighters have been crossing over from Libya, and civilians have been attacked.
This Mediterranean resort was full when a gunman started shooting.
The economy has struggled too. International lenders like the IMF offered bailouts, but the spending cuts they demanded were unpopular.
There have been mass demonstrations, even a nationwide strike.
People haven't been able to buy the basics.
On vit dans un système qui n'essaye pas d'améliorer, qui essaye de faire marcher le travail.
So it's tough to label Tunisia a success, but it's also hard to ignore that it's done better than the others. 10 years is not a long time to transform a country, let alone a whole region. And in the last couple of years, there have been more protests in places like Sudan, Algeria, and Lebanon.
The fear barrier that was broken 10 years ago has emboldened so many to continue to call out their governments. The Arab Spring is in many ways not over, it's just started.
Tunisia is far from a perfect example, but people there do have the freedom to elect who leads them, to demand change, to be heard. That's what Mohamed Bouazizi wanted, to be heard. It's what millions of people wanted when they rose up 10 years ago. We have a lot more online that looks back at the Arab Spring. You'll find all sorts of analysis and interactives on AlJazeera.com. I'll see you next week for another episode of Start Here.